We do have 17 members of our public with us, so we can move on to hearing public comments and then move forward from there. So Anthony or Rebecca, can you check to see if there are any public comments?
There is no public comment.
Great. The next item would be approval of the minutes. Since we don't have quorum, we can't approve the minutes. The next item after that is a resolution for us to continue with teleconferencing meetings. Once again, because we don't have quorum, we'll have to suspend that. The following item after that would be the DCYF budget presentation. So I would like to call up our CFO, Heidi Burbidge, to start her presentation.
Hi there. Rebecca, can you share the slides? Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I look forward to running through a brief set of slides about our DCYF department phase submission, and we'll have room for questions at the end. Feel free also to raise them throughout the presentation. I'll see if I can keep an eye on what I'm doing and also on hands or otherwise if you're raising questions. Next slide, please. For those of you who were at the last meeting, this will look familiar. This is just a quick overview again of our budget timeline. Where we are, excitingly, is just moments before we submit our departmental budget request. That will go in by next Tuesday. And then in the next month, that will be the mayor's phase. There will be potentially changes. And as you know, goes through generally enacted end of July, retroactive to July 1st. So not any change from prior years. So where we are presenting to you is what we expect will be our departmental phase budget submitted next Tuesday, though noting it is a draft in case last minute changes come in between now and Tuesday. Next slide, please. This is a recap of some information we shared before. Just noting that for fiscal 23 and 24, the projection is a 108.1 million surplus over a 2-year budget cycle. And sorry, I'm just trying to remove my screen. There we go. It's due to overall revenue growth, significant ongoing savings in retirement, and constrained ongoing cost growth. So I think last time we looked at some of the revenue drivers, it includes cost recovery related to COVID-19 emergency. So while we're showing a surplus, also longer range, less clear what the overall city and county of San Francisco financial situation will be. So the mayor's priorities this year are restoring San Francisco's vibrancy, recovery, accountability, and equity. The instructions included back to basics, so improving core service delivery within our existing budget. There were no mandatory reductions, but no increase to general fund support. And then just noting our last bullet, DCYF was invited to increase general fund budget, just very specifically noting around a couple of key issues, notably technical assistance for our grantees. So while our budget instructions were not to increase general fund support, when and if we had limited needs, that would not expand services, but would allow us to do our core services more efficiently, more effectively, we were allowed to submit an increase. So we do show a slight increase, and we'll see if that's approved in the next phase. Next slide, please. This picture is just our overall budget picture. So it shows our operating budget in darker blue, almost 2 million, compared to our other programs, SFUSD and Free City program. Next slide. And in our 22-23 proposed operating, this shows our total picture general fund of 66.6 million, federal and state grants of 6.8 million, and then the majority is the Children and Youth Fund at 126.3 million. Next slide, please. This is the slide with some detail, and I'll just walk through bits of it and happy to dig into details. I'm going to just flag a couple of things. One is we've got the fiscal 2021 actuals on both the green and the blue, the two sets. And then we have the fiscal 22 board approved budget. So that's our current year budget. But just noting for budget purposes, we pulled the board approved budget. So any grants that were received and went through accept and expend since then, or add backs or other changes since the Board of Supervisors approved the budget last year, do not show here in case that causes confusion. On the next slide, I'll go through some changes there. And then our department phase, again, draft for 22 and 23. So it's the base budget year and the BY+1. We've included both here. For sure, any questions about either base year or BY+1, please raise them. But I think for our planning purposes, we do have some instances where we are aware of our 23 requests. That information is in there. 24, often more will be adjusted next year. So our rolling budget year frequently leaves some questions. So particularly in the work orders we are going to go into detail with in a minute with JPD, we have a gap for 23, 24, because we just don't know the amount. So I would say my main focus for sure is on 23. Any questions about either 23 or 24, please ask. So just running through this quickly, a couple things I want to point out here is an expenditure recovery on the table with the green header. The increase from 22, which is 3.8 million, to 23, which is 8.3 million, is largely due to an increased work order with JPD, which we'll go into detail in a minute. So that's the large driver there. In the blue table, just pointing out, second one down, programmatic projects. Last year we had 16.6 million. That drops down to 2.3 million in 23 and 0.5 in 24. Just noting that decrease is due to a one-time $15 million learning loss project. While we received the appropriation last year, we've projected to spend it over several years. So while we're not receiving new appropriations, so we don't see an increase, we don't see a number in 23, 24, we'll have those funds available. So that's what's driving the drop there. Next slide, please. So just a few notes. I think this is in relation to a question that came up last time. Funding for CBOs is included in budget lines other than the city grant program. So that line I think is on the table before, such as work orders with other city and county departments when they have the funding, but their funds go to our grantees. Programmatic projects, so again, some of that money that could be in the learning loss or other sources, and grants. So it's on the budgeting side, we see it as it's budgeted by account level. City grant program is one line, but the ultimate kind of calculation for all CBOs or certain CBOs is not visible in a straight budget table like this. Noting again, based on the Board of Supervisor approved budget number, we received a $10 million grant from Crank Start in fiscal 22. It went through accept and expend last month. All of those funds will be distributed to CBOs, and it's part of our revised 22 budget, but was received since the board approved the budget last July. And DCYF's current grant making cycle, just noting it was extended by 1 year due to the COVID-19 emergency, so there are no changes to the base grants. So again, just that cycle was extended. So when we look at our five-year, this one is a 6-year cycle. And noting that we've begun the planning process for the services allocation plan. For the DCYF approach to budgeting this cycle, just pulling out four things I wanted to highlight: advancing racial equity, recovery and restoring vibrancy, investments in CBOs, and additional technical assistance support for grantees. Next slide. And I'm just going to run through a couple of quick things about collaboration with Juvenile Probation Department to better serve youth and families here, noting that Jasmine and many others are on this call who have a great deal more detail. So I hope you can tolerate my presentation. Feel free to jump in after, correct, to add. But just from a budget standpoint, just letting you know what this new money is on our side. SB 823 shifted responsibility to the counties and adjusted the age of jurisdiction depending on the offense in some cases. So part of this required that each county set up a DJJ realignment subcommittee and develop a plan. That plan was submitted by January 1st of this year. And San Francisco's current and projected funding based on the approval of that plan includes $805,000 this year, goes up to 2.3 million in 23, and goes up to 3.8 million in 24. Next slide. Thank you. So we will show additional staff in year 2 of this block grant, which is fiscal 23, at DCYF to support the ongoing implementation, grant making, and monitoring use of these funds. At a high level, it leverages existing resources and communities across all settings, and particularly in secure youth treatment facilities. So credible messenger life coaches, whole family support, flexible funding, collective training for system stakeholders. So many of these things fall in DCYF. So a large amount of these funds will be work ordered over to DCYF to administer. At that, I think I'll turn it over to questions, particularly detailed questions about JPD. I would likely refer to Jasmine or others on the call. Thank you.
Forgot that I was sharing or facilitating. Thank you, Heidi. Once again, we are really happy that the mayor's office did not make us cut anything, and that the mayor's office is really supporting us in holding our CBOs whole, as well as this new project, our new partnership with the Juvenile Probation Department. With that, I would like to ask any committee members if they have questions. I don't see any. Committee members, can I open this up for public comments?
Yes, please do.
So I would like to open this up to public comments. I think that there's a script. Someone can help me with that. For on Zoom, I just do your raise hand, and our administrator will tag you. And if you are on a phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand. And then our administrator will find you as well. Are there any questions from the public?
Yeah, there's one.
Great.
I will bring them in.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Chris from Richmond Neighborhood Center and the Service Provider Working Group. And I wanted to circle back to a question that we asked at the previous budget presentation, specifically around the decreases from fiscal year 22-23 to fiscal year 23-24 in the area of the city grant program, and whether or not there was any additional detail on the nature of these decreases or specific areas that would lead to such a significant drop in funding.
Sure, thank you for the question. So I think the best way to frame it is use of one-time funds in 23 keeps us whole in 23, but those are one-time funds. So at this point, we don't have funding that would carry forward to 24. So the decrease shows where the one-time funds would drop off. That said, also noting that additional funds that will go to CBOs will be budgeted in other lines. So for example, work orders from other departments or grant funding. So I think the total picture, I hope this is, I'd like to answer your question directly, but from a budget standpoint, I understand where you're seeing the drop, but if you are looking at total amounts paid to all CBOs or particular CBOs, that is information we would pull differently. It's not visible in a budget line in the same way. But the decrease in the budget is caused by one-time funds to reach amounts that we are aiming to in 23. And since they're one-time funds, they are not available in 24. So likely next year we would correct or find other one-time funds, otherwise address. But the bottom line is I think it's a question, and Maria, please jump in as well. It sounds like an accounting question. So it would be sort of the total payment from many sources to CBOs as opposed to budget lines that are, again, tied to specific account codes.
Thank you, Heidi, for that very accounting answer. And I think for our CBOs, those were one-time add backs. that came into our budget that the supervisors, board of supervisors provided support for. So a lot of you asked for additional funding from the board for a number of different projects. And those dollars came to us as one-time sources. And so because they're one time, we cannot continue them because we do not have more monies for them. And part of this is also because the juvenile JPD also gave us one-time funding to support the cuts that we had to make last year. And so those were once again one-time supports. And that's why you're seeing this shift or this reduction. But what Heidi is saying is that in terms of our entire grant, if you look at our base grant to where we are now, it's the same, except for that what you saw the bump from last year. Chris, does that make sense? Oh, did we just remove him?
Let me give him permission to talk again.
It does somewhat make sense. You know, I recognize that there's probably quite a bit in terms of add back that was there. I was just noticing the kind of the decrease was significant, more than what add back could account for, because I'm approximating that each district has about $1 million in total add back of discretionary funds. And that the decrease alone in that area alone was already 13 million. So it had to be something a little bit more than just add back. But I understand that there's that JPD amount, which certainly could account for it. I'm just wondering, as we kind of think and project forward, if those add back dollars were kind of deemed necessary in previous budgets. When we think about not decreasing any budgets, I also think about not decreasing any add back as we kind of go into the foreseeable future, and how we might be transparent about what is going to be lost in those one-time fees.
Yeah, so once again, between the JPD reductions, which kept services whole when DCYF had to meet budget cuts. So once again, that filled that gap. And that's why you see the gap now. And monies that came into DCYF from the board to do things that were very COVID specific, like, we paid for increased, there were additional monies that came to us to pay for increased meals that we had to purchase for the Community Hubs initiative. We had monies that came into our department that helped us pay for COVID testing. So those were all very COVID specific funds, and there were millions of dollars. And so that's why you're seeing all those things now combined together, and it looks like a lot, but I hear what you're saying, Chris. And maybe what we could do is drill down even more, but I will tell you that I don't believe that CBOs are going to feel the difference, because a lot of this reduction is a more like Heidi said, accounting, from the accounting side. So do we have any other public comments? I realize I'm not supposed to be engaging in a dialogue, but.
There's no other public comment.
There is a comment, a question that was posed in the chat by Cindy. She says, there was a mention of CBO. How about NPOs? Will there be funding for NPOs?
I'm so sorry, Cindy. I don't know what the acronym NPO stands for. Can you help? Nonprofit organizations. Oh, so for us, nonprofit organizations are the same as community-based organizations. We don't use the word, the acronyms NPO. We use them simultaneous. They're the same to us. Yes, it is the same. If we don't have any other public comments, I will bring this back to members of the committee. If you all have any questions or comments. And I still don't believe we have Jada here. Okay, well, unfortunately, we can't vote on this right now. So we can table this and move into the next item, which is a report of the two large initiatives that DCYF was tasked to implement this past year. The first one is called SF Rise, which is an initiative that Supervisor Hillary Ronan through ordinance created and asked DCYF to provide the backbone support for it. The second is the Children and Families Recovery Plan, which the mayor tasked us to provide infrastructure support for. So I wanted to provide the committee with a status update on both of these plans. So I'm going to hand this over to Jasmine Dawson, who will go first, and then Abigail Stewart-Kahn after that.
Great. Thank you, Maria. Great to see everyone. I'm going to give an update on SF Rise, and then I will pass it to Abigail. We came to the group a couple months ago and just shared, this big effort that we've been working on. And so the plans in summary, just to remind folks, is that we work closely with key stakeholders. We had a number of community engagement and listening sessions happening. And for SF Rise, we focused heavily on SFUSD students, creating a menu of in and out of school interventions to meet students' needs, and coordinating enrichment and retention services, and also planning to accelerate learning and wraparound services that were consistent with the community schools model. And we're still on schedule and set to complete the plan in March of this year. And I'll just share too that for the Children and Family Recovery Plan, that plan is focused on whole child family and setting priorities for the city's next budget cycle. And they did complete the plan. That plan was completed in December. And so where we are with SF Rise. Just as a reminder, the focus is about increasing student proficiency, student enrollment, and creating full-scale enrichment services. Next slide. And the goals, again, here, very similar to what was echoed in the ordinance. This has been our main focal area. We've been working on this for almost a year now. And again, these are the focus areas: increasing student proficiency, increasing enrollment, and then expanding enrichment programs. And what we've been up to. So since we've come to you, we've since had a great presentation from the Service Provider Working Group and came in and talked with us about CBOs and wages and wage equity work and that they've been doing. And to help ground and understand the work for the work group so they can keep these things in mind as they work towards the final plan. We also had a great presentation from Anne-Marie Gordon from the SFUSD Budget Services Offices. And that was really great because it helped us level set around what's going on currently with the school district's budget. And so as we think about final recommendations, we are keeping these things in mind. As a reminder too, here's all the stakeholders that we heard from, specifically students. We had a number of focus groups and surveys. We had YPAR activities happening in the middle schools and in the high schools. We heard from parents. We had focus groups and surveys. We also had SFUSD administrators engaged heavily as well. We also had focus groups and interviews with principals and social workers, CBO staff, surveys, and additional focus groups and interviews with people who work with students every day. So we really wanted to make sure that we got a strong understanding of not just community side, but also to the school side and helping to inform the recommendations that we are working towards. Next slide, please. And here's what we heard. In summary, We heard this repeated with students, families, and administrators and CBO staff, as well as it came up heavily in work group discussions, really around behavioral and mental health. There was a lot of anxiety and fear and isolation that folks were expressing and students were expressing. Adjustments to in-person and COVID. We heard there was help that was needed for dysregulation and executive functioning, and a need for on-site wellness spaces. Around out of school time, the things that came up heavily were around coordination and alignment with the school day. We heard extending and maximizing benefits to students was important, and then leveraging CBO relationships for families and outreach. And then also too, the need for more caring adults. Academic supports was another big bucket that we had. And we really looked at and heard from the need for literacy support, the need for long-term impacts and looking at long-term impacts, and then the need for supports for students with special needs, as well as students ask for patience and time. The next slide, please. And then so where we are with our considerations, we went through a pretty robust process where we had prioritization processes happening. It was based on the work group's purpose, their goals that were outlined in the ordinance, the changing context of the work, and essentially the budget, SFUSD budget landscape. We started off pretty heavily talking about community schools as a model. It figured prominently in the preliminary recommendations. And then we realized that we needed to look closely actually at community school partnerships and really think strategically about what those recommendations needed to be. So these were a lot of the considerations we had as we started landing on where the recommendations would fall. We also looked at and understood that it was complex. A lot of these recommendations were around systems level change and required coordination between partners. And we had to identify what was most urgent, most implementable, and then what then to focus on. Our process again included refining, reviewing, and reducing recommendations. We had to set criteria and rating and weighting. We looked at applying the criteria to prioritize the recommendations, and then we ultimately created a final list of recommendations. And on the right here, you'll see these are the big bucket areas where the recommendations fall. They fall around systems alignment and capacity building and development. They fall along the lines of social emotional health and wellness. The biggest one was definitely academic growth. And then the other one was safe transit, and that was really around accessibility. And next slide, please. And so what's coming next? For us, now that we have a great idea or a good idea of where we are with the recommendations, we're now in alignment conversations. So basically that looks like talking to school leadership at a deeper level, looking closely at what these recommendations are and what could be the possible impacts on them, and then also on the city and our CBO partners. That also includes talking with SFMTA and Department of Public Health. Primarily, these three departments were called out throughout the preliminary report, and that continued to be the theme as we work towards and heard more community engagement. So these big departments play a big role in whether these recommendations are going to be implementable. And so we're at that point now where we're going to start having those conversations. And then our next step will be to draft, and actually just to release the draft report. We anticipate doing a draft of that sometime later this week. And then we also anticipate having another youth and young adult and families Board of Supervisor committee hearing to pass the resolution, a resolution. And as folks may remember, this was a part of the sunset of the work within the ordinance that we are working under. And then we're going to go into implementation. That's going to be a big piece. Where does the work fall in terms of the recommendations on the city side, on the district side? Who plays that role? We'll be looking at cost, and we'll be looking at, how do we measure these items? And so that's really where we are now. And I just want to encourage folks that want to continue to follow the conversation to look at the DCYF.org SFRISE landing page. We continue to put the meeting notes there as we work towards the final stages of the final report for SFRISE. And that's it for me. And so maybe we'll go into Abigail and then we'll take questions. And so Abigail, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you, Jasmine. Good afternoon. Abigail Stewart-Kahn, I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Special Advisor for Children and Family Recovery. This is, I'm happy to say, the fourth time that we've been lucky to be here with you all talking about the Children and Family Recovery Plan. And as Jasmine said, we just wanted to loop back with you all on SF Rise and Recovery to provide a status update, sort of where are we on Valentine's Day in 2022 with these two significant lifts. Next slide, please, Rebecca. Thank you. So as a refresher, the way we engaged in this plan was to spend tremendous amount of time in a very fast way, listening deeply to children and families and caregivers in the community. And when we talked to experts nationally and then talked to our local experts who are living life as children and young people in San Francisco, these are the areas that really came up as needs for recovery. So where SF Rise focuses very deeply on SFUSD and learning loss, as Jasmine said, the recovery plan is intended to be high level and across all the needs of children and families to recover in our community. So you see we have health and mental health, unfinished learning, which will draw heavily on the recommendations of SF Rise, but also children learn everywhere in our community. So we want to focus our time and attention on how can we support parents, for example, as the number one and first teachers of children. So these were the work areas that we set about to focus on. And what we did was, next slide, please. To do this, we focused on listening to the voices of the most vulnerable in our community. So building on the core principles of the CNA and anywhere that DCYF was in community, we layered in questions about children and family need for recovery. And we made sure we were really focused on talking to the populations you see here. So straight from the beginning, the most vulnerable communities' voices are centered in the creation of this plan. Next slide, please. And this is really the timeline we've been following. So apologies, there's some noise on my end. I hope you all can hear me. But we in May and June, we were kind of looking nationally and looking for available literature. There was not much at that time. A lot more has been written and published since. And we began a deep listening session in July through September. We kicked off a task force. Chair Molly was a sort of a cross representative from the OAC. And we were lucky to have one of the tri-chairs of SPWG join that committee as well. The job of that committee was really to listen to the data and the voice from community and help us to interpret, digest it, and then to start to think about what the recommendations might look like. And so that's what we've been working on from September through December. We've submitted the recovery plan to our partners in the mayor's office and are working back and forth with the mayor's office about priorities, feasibility, high-level costing, and kind of generally putting the finishing touches on all of this so that we can produce the plan hopefully very soon. And as Jasmine said, really start to think about the implementation. What I expect will come out is a really broad brush report with high-level recommendations and then a call to action so that we can all figure out what role we have to play in getting kids and families what they need to recover. Thank you, Rebecca. Next slide, please. So these were our community voices. You can see we were lucky enough to talk to or survey thousands of young people, parents, and caregivers. We were able to really talk directly with young people and also do focus groups. And really this information, this data, this community voice was the driver behind the plan. Next slide, please. And so I just want to highlight some of the meaningful types of things that young people and parents and caregivers are telling us. And this won't be new information to anybody listening to this or to any of the members who I know spend a lot of time in community and listening to community, but just so that we're really lifting up the voices of what young people and caregivers are telling us. One young person said, "I would feel more safe if people helped each other and we could depend more on one another. I wish I could feel safe." A parent caregiver told us, "At this time, we're experiencing late rent debt. It used to be I struggled to keep healthy food on the table. Now I open the cupboard and nothing is there." Another parent or caregiver told us, "I don't know why this has to be so hard. We're working off of 3 different systems. Here we are, 2 educated people, and I don't even know where to start." Another young person told us, there is not anywhere to go. It's so difficult to find services. It's about who you know, not what you know. There's such a lack of information. And again, we have thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of this type of really, really important and incredibly difficult to hear information that we use to guide and drive our work. And we're continuing to center these voices as we think about the priorities and recommendations that we want advanced first. Next slide, please. We also were lucky. I keep saying one of the few benefits of Zoom, because I am one of these people who does not do well working remotely by Zoom, is that we could talk much faster with many more community experts and leaders. We didn't have to worry about room space and scheduling in the same way. And so we were able to engage in over 100 hours of stakeholder meetings. You see our task force met, and we talked with more than 500 community stakeholders and city partners. And so I just want to lift up a quote or two of the experience of the Recovery Plan Task Force itself. This one is particularly meaningful to me. I want to raise my kids in the San Francisco we created in this group. And so I think it was an incredibly productive and positive experience for those of us lucky enough to be involved. Another person said, I think this process could be an example for how multi-sectors can come together while letting community voice guide us. Next slide, please. So again, we are going to our recommendations will fall in the areas that we embarked on. This is what community and young people are telling us are their recovery needs. And so the recommendations and the strategies will line up in these areas. Next slide, please. The next few slides are really focusing on gratitude for the many remarkable contributors. You can see we had really deep engagement with our Board of Supervisors. This is the 4th time you all have made space for me to talk about the Children and Family Recovery Plan in this public forum. So we get the benefit of the expertise of the OAC members and the community that zooms in here. So thank you. One thing to note, I just want to lift up a few things that we talked about last time. So really in terms of systems change, really hearing from this group, the importance of, if we're going to do big coordinated messaging approaches, that we learned that it really can't be, just the city pushing out messages. That of course we know we need to partner deeply with trusted community members. And that feedback from the OIC definitely centered itself in the task force conversations about improved communications, that it needs to be government and community partnership together in order to reach the people we're most trying to reach. This group talked a lot about translation as an issue, reaching people that reach people through the places where young people and families are and trust, and getting a single simple message coordinated, and then helping and working with community to get that out. But we also talked about targeted universalism. Should we be trying to fix the system with additional resources, or should we just be making the system work better for kids, which I thought was an incredibly important discourse that came from members of this committee. So I just want to sort of lift up all of that type of feedback. That's just some that we got from this group, and let you know how central that was to our task force and recommendations. Here you see further members who worked on this. I really want to thank the recovery plan team and the rest of the staff at DCYF that have made this process possible. I think there's maybe one more slide. Thank you. And here we're just in this final stages, hopefully releasing the plan this month. And there's similar to RISE, there's a place that you can kind of follow along and get more information on the DCYF website. Thank you so much.
Vice Chair Jada, I'm going to hand this back to you. Unfortunately, I have to inform everyone that our member, Julie Trung Roberts, actually has left the meeting for a family emergency. So we are still back at not having quorum. So at this phase, I would just recommend to Vice Chair Jada, we would just continue through our meeting as an informational meeting. And then at the next meeting, we can vote to approve the minutes at a minimum.
Okay, sounds good. So then we can go ahead and proceed with public comment. So let's start with that prior to our discussion. So is there any public comment on this agenda item? From your screen, you can select raise hand, or from your phone, you can press *9. And Anthony, are there any speakers in the queue?
There are no speakers in it. Oh, there's one. Give me 1 second.
Thank you, Anthony, and hi, Jada. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. This is Chris from Richmond Neighborhood Center and Service Provider Working Group. I wanted to first start off by just offering my appreciation and gratitude for Abigail, who has definitely been out in the community, soliciting input from various stakeholders, and it's clearly done an extremely thorough job in terms of planning out a process that involves multiple levels of stakeholder engagement. So really, really, really appreciative of all of that hard work and an energy that went into this, this important process. I did want to understand a little bit in terms of a clarification of in what ways revenue is tied to the SF RISE plan, specifically either expanding opportunities for additional revenue for this work, or is it about reprioritizing current city dollars? I just want to be realistic, and I think one of my fears is that, seeing that there's a potential $90 million cut to SFUSD over the next 2 years that's been well publicized, how we actually anticipate increasing student proficiency, enrollment, and expanding enrichment programs. I don't necessarily see that in the current DCYF budget for 22-23 or 23-24. And I certainly don't see it in the SFUSD budget. So just really curious about how revenue ties into all this, and in what way is it a recommendation area, or is it a major part of the work of SF RISE? I'm just not clear on that.
Vice Chair Jada, do you mind if I answer that question?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Chris, for that question. And I think this is what I've realized is the problem when we're doing too many things all at the same time. So just to once again be clear, the SF RISE work, which was created through ordinance by Supervisor Ronan to really focus on SFUSD's students and to address learning loss for those students. So the ordinance really speaks to how we, the big we as a city, can come together to support these students. That includes city folks, CBOs, and SFUSD. The recovery plan, which Abigail worked really hard on, looks really at citywide strategies. So although there are lots of crossover, because of course they're all lots of the same children, but it really, for the recovery plan, was more and included all children, regardless of public school status. So there's that slight nuance. In terms of money for both projects, actually. So what Supervisor Ronan has made clear is that for SF RISE, she was going to go and fundraise for that. I think you all remember a SF Chronicle article that spoke about this, where she said that she was going to go and try to fundraise hundreds of millions of dollars from local philanthropists so that they could come and provide this type of support. And her goal was to create a plan to then give to those philanthropists to fund. For the recovery plan, this is where we are now in conversations with city departments about what they are currently doing and what they can increase in what they're doing to support children and families. So that is going to be part of the mayor's budget process. I recognize that that's not a satisfactory answer because there's no numbers right now, but that is where we are.
All right. Thank you, Chris, for your question. Anthony, are there any other speakers in the queue?
There are no other speakers in the queue.
All right, so I'm hearing no further callers. Public comment is now closed, and we can proceed with committee discussion. So are there any committee discussion on this item? Members, you can raise your hand. All right, so seeing none, I just had a quick question referring to the recommendation areas. I possibly missed it, but I wanted to know, what did the portion about unfinished learning refer to exactly?
Vice Chair, is that a question about the recovery plan or SF Rise?
Sorry, yes, the recovery plan.
Great, that's an excellent question. Maria, would you like me to take a stab at that? Okay, great.
Go ahead.
So as we've been trying to articulate, and I agree with Maria that there's a lot going on, and there's sort of these big Venn diagrams between SF Rise and recovery. What we did, because DCYF was tapped to be the backbone of both of these entities, we agreed that because SF Rise focused so much on sort of in the school and learning and unfinished learning in the school, that we would focus the attention of the recovery plan on everywhere else that learning happens. Unfinished learning really came up from community as, there's unfinished learning and then there's new and expanded learning. So there's two learning topics. The unfinished learning was everything that we've all been hearing and seeing that our young people are experiencing. We tried to focus our recommendations in the recovery plan on ways that could be solved for outside of the school day. So within our after school and summer programming, in early childcare, in supporting parents to be the educators of their children. One topic that came up, for example, is my kids are online. This is a new learning area. My kids are so online in ways that I never experienced before, which many caregivers said was exciting, right? We've done great work collectively to begin to do a better job bridging the digital divide, but that comes with a lot of alarm and fear, and caregivers telling us, now my kids are only online and I'm worried about screen addiction and I'm worried about safety and wellness. I remember clearly this group talking about the term digital citizenship maybe isn't quite right because of it being triggering around the word citizenship. So how do we support parents whose kids are online so much more, and I think will continue to be? How do we support the parents and caregivers to have the tools they need to support their kids? And then, we looked at a lot of the learning loss things that are focused on in the recovery plan, and how where kids learn not in school could come and support. So what tutoring programs are happening and could be built and expanded at libraries. What summer programming looked like last summer, and what were the gaps that should be filled this summer. Does that speak to your question, Vice Chair?
Yes, perfect. Thank you. All right, is there any other committee discussion on this item before we move on? All right, so we can go to SPWG comments. Are there any comments at this time on this for this item? All right, so we can move on to the next agenda item. So the next item on the agenda is agenda item number 8, which is the report of the OAC chair. We do not have a report for the chair today. Molly is out at a medical appointment today, so she cannot be with us. And let's see. Since we do not have a report, I'm going to go ahead and skip public comment, and we can move on to the next agenda item, which is number 8, being the election of the vice chair of the OAC. So this item allows the committee members to nominate and elect the seat of the OAC vice chair. So I'm going to ask if there are any nominations, in which self-nominations are included, for the position of the vice chair.
Actually, Vice Chair Mal, Jada, because we don't have quorum, how are we going to do this?
Yeah, would this have to be tabled? I'm thinking item 9 and 10 even.
Yeah, Someone from my staff, please help. I guess we could take nominations,
Mhm.
but once again, there's no voting that can happen.
Okay.
Although we are missing a few of the OAC members. So I don't know if it makes sense to take nominations when we have a few members not here.
Right. Right. Can we move forth with tabling then? Just because since there's only 3 of us here right now. Oh, yes, Jennifer.
Hi there, just quick question. So since we have to table so many items today, since we don't have quorum, are we permitted to schedule another meeting in advance of our next scheduled meeting so that we don't have to wait until that meeting to cover all of these items?
That is a good question. Our next meeting, I believe, Maria, correct me if I'm wrong, is in May.
That's
So yeah, it would be a long time, but I'm not quite sure.
Well, scheduling meetings is the authority of the chair. That's one of the powers of the chair. So maybe we can, Jada, you, Molly, and I can have a discussion about that. I do feel that as long as we were able to present the budget, we will indicate that we did not have quorum, and so we couldn't approve the budget, but the budget was presented. I think that satisfies the requirements for us. And the other items here are the elections. So we could hold off elections until May. But once again, we can talk to Chair Molly and you at a later time.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good since it'll be all the way in May.
Yeah.
Okay. So just for the record, we will be tabling items 9 and 10, which include the election of the vice chair and the chair of the OAC. So I will go ahead and proceed to item number 10, which is the report of the DCYF director. So I'll pass it back to you, Maria.
Great. And this is item number 11, the director's report. Good afternoon. Happy Valentine's Day to everyone. I have a few items, and then I'm going to call up one of our data analysts, Ryan Sapinoso, to help me walk you through our CNA, our Community Needs Assessment updates. So just very quickly, I want to let everyone know and confirm that a item that I presented at our last OAC meeting that was called the Children's First Initiative Charter Amendment. After many iterations of conversations, both at the Board of Supervisors and with the mayor, there was a decision, a collective decision, but a decision that was made at the Board of Supervisors to postpone and essentially kill this charter amendment. So this charter amendment is not moving forward. There will be no Children's First Initiative charter that will be on the June ballot. Part of the postponing this charter amendment is to allow for more and deeper community engagement. The biggest critique that we had regarding this charter amendment was that DCYF did not take the time to really engage our CBO partners. And once again, I really do truly apologize for that. I'm so sorry that we moved so fast that we didn't wait to gather enough feedback and have more people join us. So lesson learned. We have now reached out to the SPWG tri-chairs to have them help us gather and gather more, well, bring community folks together so that we can gather more feedback and really engage in a deep community dialogue. I also had the privilege of meeting with the SPWG core team the other day, and it sounds like we are now moving forward with a plan for deeper engagement. And hopefully later, one of the tri-chairs can talk a little bit about that. I also want to share with OAC members and the public that the city has extended the mandatory vaccination requirements for all commissions and committees. So now the extension for committees to share your vaccination status to the end of February 28th. And I know that this was something that committee member Julie was really interested in, was the ability for committees such as ours to continue to meet virtually because it helps working families. And the city has actually made a decision on that. So all charter created commissions have to go back into in-person or a hybrid meeting starting the first week in March. And non-charter created commissions, which we are one of, can continue to meet virtually. So we will be able to continue to meet virtually until we are informed otherwise. And then finally, as usual, I just give a quick update on our health guidance. I do want to share that the state has informed the governor has informed the state that he will be lifting the mask mandate by tomorrow, February 15th. And that means that the city of San Francisco, as usual, will follow the state's guidelines. I want to just reiterate that although we will allow on February 16th, vaccinated people to not have to wear masks if they choose not to wear masks indoors, universal masking will still be required in certain places, regardless of vaccination status. And that includes public transportation, our K-12 schools, childcare centers, high-risk settings such as healthcare facilities, correctional facilities, and homeless shelters, long-term facilities, and other congregate care shelters and places. And I will let you know when those mask mandates change, but for now, those settings are still required to wear mask. And then of course, everyone to continue to stay safe. If you have not received your vaccination, to please receive your vaccinations. If you need your boosters, please get your boosters. The city is trying really hard to make sure that as many people who want to get vaccinated, want to get boosted, to do so. So that ends my part. I want to call up Ryan, who's going to share with you an update on what we have done already around the community needs assessment, and where we will be going next with this. So Ryan, can you please? Oh yeah, there you go.
Yep. Thanks, Maria. Good afternoon, OAC members, service providers, members of the public. My name is Ryan Sapinoso. I'm an analyst on DCYF's research, eval, and data team. I've been holding coordination of CNA activities and report development for the past few months. So as Maria mentioned, and then a similar approach to colleagues Jasmine and Abigail, I'll broadly be presenting a quick where have we been, where are we now, and what's coming up for the CNA. We're going to stay a bit broad and zoomed out, given that it's also going to be given a little bit more of a detailed discussion in upcoming meetings, April, May, June onward. So Rebecca, thank you, Rebecca. So where have we been? We're still in the 2018 to now 2024 funding cycle. If we rewind or remember a world pre-pandemic, the CNA launched pre-pandemic in 2019. We had citywide, we launched a citywide campaign, district by district. We held We Are the City Summits, which allowed us to engage parents, youth, CBOs, in the conversations that help us just answer the guiding questions of the CNA. How are children, youth, and families faring? What are service gaps, service needs, and disparities among groups? So that was rolling in 2019, but by the time we hit March 2020, shelter in place and the full onset of the pandemic, everything just kind of hit the brakes. Full halt on focus groups, no more surveys, no data collection, and we just didn't quite know when things would be picking back up again. When we hit May 2021 and vaccine rollouts, this is when DCYF staff went back to the CNA planning process, revised the plan, and by May 21, a new plan set off and was targeting CNA completion for June 2022, which is what we're still holding to and still on track with. Summer 21 brought some major staffing transitions with the departure of our data and eval manager / CNA project manager. By the fall, we were also picking back up with focus groups still, surveys, interviews, and just focused heavily in on data collection, which has now pretty much wrapped up as of the end of January. So again, we're still really trying to stay on course here with the completion timelines established back in May 21. In that we are focused in on writing, hoping to meet different approval, review, feedback conversations April, May, and June. And yeah, assuming a successful review and approval process by June, we should be in shape to then move on to SAP and our planning in subsequent years. Thanks, Rebecca. So yeah, just rewinding back, this has already been kind of mentioned and stressed by Abigail and Jasmine. But just to call out again, community engagement has been the meat of the work as we've resumed the CNA. Again, pre-pandemic in 2019, city summits, where the citywide summits were happening. Breakout discussions occurred in every session. We broke out into youth and parent groups, CBO staff groups, and these were attended by 123 young folks and transitional age young adults, 162 parents, 241 CBO staff. The spirit of the We Are the City, just a line of questioning, conversation, discussion themes, they've also been kept alive through our comms team as we've had ongoing CBO spotlights up on our blogs. We've also been inviting CBO leadership into DCYF conversations via our fireside chats that we have with all staff meetings. Independent of that, We Are the City engagement work, CNA engagements themselves have taken on the broad buckets of surveys, focus groups, and interviews. So these numbers have also kind of been presented by Jasmine and Abigail in slightly different cuts. There's a bit of overlap here. It just kind of depends on the level of detail or the actual, specificity of the data collection instrument we're talking about. For CNA, just broad specific engagements, we had over 250 youth responses and over 2,000 parent responses. So these are cases where DCYF staff and members of our contracted research team at Clarity Social Research were out in community at events hosted by our partners. We sent folks out to also just do tabling at the Cal Academy, just engaging folks, asking folks to come up to the table and respond to a survey that gets at, what are your service needs? What challenges do you have in accessing childcare? What do you envision as priorities for your young folks wanting to increase college enrollment, plan on career moves? That was one form of survey we put out. That data collection spanned from roughly August up to December, January. Another form of survey we put out was a really quick turnaround. Planning and development with SFUSD happened pretty much November. We deployed it in December and closed collection after a month. This was aimed specifically at middle school and high school students to understand service interests and needs and what current take-up looks like. So rephrase in broad strokes, the survey asked, hey, 6th through 8th graders or 9th through 12th graders, what are you interested in participating in at schools? What are the topics you want, ranging from health education to STEM? What time of day works best for you? And what are you already taking up? So we could see if there is a certain gap in what's already being utilized and engaged, and what, if interest and actual engagement are seeing some kind of misalignment that we should spot and try to respond to. And again, also mentioned by Jasmine and Abigail, youth participatory action research surveys have been going out, and collection has been ongoing. We still have responses coming in from Beacons, YLI, and PEP. But I think as of our last report, we had over 850 responses. And I think some recently just came in over the weekend, so this could probably use an updated number. On the focus group notes, just from fall up to now, 25 sessions were completed. 300 plus participants spanning both young folks and parents. depending on where the pandemic was throwing wrenches in our planning, we skewed mostly to online engagement for our focus groups. There were one or two that we did manage to squeeze in person in between different kinds of waves of surges. So we're thankful that we had some opportunities to engage folks in person again, and just kind of listen and interact and hold conversations in a way that, you know, you don't have to work around the awkwardness of Zoom and technology. So thankful that that happened, which is not to say that, you know, Zoom focus groups were not also providing us with rich insights and valuable voices from our community members. In efforts to make sure that, you know, accessibility and engagement were as wide as possible, we offered and did plan on our focus groups to be facilitated in non-English as community needs, you know, were vocalized. Interpretations were made available, and also to incentivize participation, we offered $50 stipends for all participants. And beyond surveys and focus groups, interviews were also another method that we leaned in on for just community engagement and data collection. In the spirit of recognizing that folks who are out in the field providing services to our young folks and our families are experts in what the communities are experiencing, we engaged SFUSD staff, administrators, CBO staff, service providers, as well as staff from sister city departments in conversations to just understand what are they experiencing, what are they observing and seeing in just kind of youth impacts of the pandemic. Yeah, so similar lines of questioning, just a kind of slightly different target for the audience and kind of level of insight to collect from. And alongside that, there were individual community member interviews collected in similar instances where we had events set up for surveying. Yeah, so again, lots of community engagement in the works. Some of these emerging findings have already been mentioned from Jasmine and Abigail's work. And all this to say, all of this citywide community engagement could not have been done without the support and opportunities opened up by partners here on the line with us, partners with other city departments, and new relationships that were just initiated. So this is a short list, but this is also just to say thank you to all who just responded to any of us saying, like, we are wanting to hear community voice. We're hoping to zoom in on this particular population. Ryan, as a red analyst, only knows Jasmine and Abigail, so we definitely need some doors opened. And folks responded, connected with us, and just coordinated to make sure that parents could show up to speak with us. Youth could show up to speak with us. We could be present at places and shared spaces where there would be parents and young folks. So yeah, just thank you. There was a lot of support from the community and the network that we have around us that went into this. So that was a lot of where have we been? Where are we now? And what do we have ahead? DCYF staff are currently focused in on writing. The writing process is going to be held by staff across multiple units, including research, eval, and data, members of our funding team, members of our citywide partnerships team. And there's going to be extensive review built in from our comms team to help us design, senior staff. And there will be moments where we reach out for feedback, reactions, and then needs for revision. I'll say January up to spring, DCYF staff internally is really just going to focus intensely on the analyses and writing, again, to just address the broad questions of how are children, youth, and families faring, what are service disparities and gaps, how has COVID impacted our sense of youth and family needs across the city. In April, we hope to engage the Service Provider Working Group to just share previews of findings emerging in the CNA. So again, I think this is something that was mentioned or set back in the May plan, these benchmarks for approval for this kind of closing phase. April, we hope to reach out to the Service Providers Working Group and just kind of share, reflect on reactions based on preview of emerging findings. The May OAC meeting, or the rescheduled OAC meeting now in May, should be focusing as well again on CNA previews or presentation of emerging findings. This is mostly to give the OAC a sense of what to expect for the full report, which should be ready by June. Assuming we do have conditions and revisions and feedback addressed adequately in place by June, we would then be aiming for a submission to the Board of Supervisors by June, and hopefully an approval before that July I believe July Board of Supervisors meeting, so that we can have everything in green lit before the summer recess from Board of Supervisors. I think that about wraps up where have we been, where are we at now, and what's ahead for CNA.
Thank you so much, Ryan. And with that, that concludes my director's report.
All right, thank you, Maria, for your report, and Ryan for providing an update on the CNA. So let's go ahead and proceed with public comment. Is there any public comment on this agenda item? From your screen, you can select raise hand, or from your phone, you can press *9. Anthony, are there any speakers in the queue?
There are no speakers in the queue.
All right, so public comment is now closed. Is there any committee discussion? Members, you can now raise your hands. All right, seeing no committee discussion, is there any service provider working group discussion? You can now raise your hands, SPWG members. All right, seeing no discussion, we will conclude this item and move on to item number 12, which is the report of the Service Provider Working Group presented by Madison, Frederica, and Kian. Oh, I see Madison raising. Oh, we need to do an invite.
Oh. Anthony, can you bring in? Oh,
Yeah, I'm moving her over.
thank you.
Thank you.
And I guess Frederic and Kian as well, if he's on.
Hi, everyone. It's Madison here. Kian is not joining us today. He is taking care of his kid, but Frederic and I will be giving the update, and Frederic's going to kick us off. I think you're a panelist now, right, Frederic?
Now I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Gone for some reason.
We can hear you. We just can't see you, Frederic.
That is not intentional. So I'm trying to figure this out. So in the meantime, Madison, why don't you start with the wage equity conversation?
Okay, sounds good. So many of you guys know that a lot of our advocacy work has been focused around increasing wages for nonprofit workers. We've had a lot happen in the last couple of weeks. We've been very busy, but I wanted to share with this group that we are still prioritizing that work for our spring advocacy. I think we shared in the last meeting, but we have an intern from USF who's in a master's program there, and he's been supporting us with just doing some research for that work and really trying to keep the ball rolling on getting together our advocacy request for this year. We're likely going to have two asks. So the first will be focused on trying to memorialize the cost of doing business increase into budgets moving forward. So every single year, one of our asks is to get the cost of doing business increase, which is kind of the city's attempt to address the raising costs each year for nonprofits. And so we feel like that's something that should be important and that we shouldn't have to ask for each year, but that should be a part of kind of the standard in the budget moving forward. So the second ask is still being developed, but it is going to be more focused on addressing the wage inequities that exist for nonprofit workers. So specifically, how much less nonprofit workers make compared to city employees for comparable work, as well as how city or nonprofit worker wages compare to the actual cost of living. So that is the component that's being developed right now. And really, the capacity, I think this ask will be focused a lot around more investment in building solutions to this problem, because we know it's a super complex problem and it can't just be solved with one piece of legislation or one policy change or one working group, but it's really a part of, it transcends into housing, into transportation, all of these different areas. And so that's probably going to be the main focus of the second ask as well. Very exciting. I've been in this service provider working group for like 4 years now. And I think this is each year we have a request around wage equity, and this year is the year that we've had the most interest from other people. So both from the city side, so we have a meeting set up with the controller to talk about this work. So thank you to Maria for really pushing this internally with the city and getting folks to prioritize this work. We've had outreach from different people from different nonprofits who are working on this work internally with their organizations, as well as some interest from some private foundation folks on this. So we're really excited about that and feel like we have a lot of momentum with this work. So we'll continue to keep you all updated. Frederic, we still can't see you, but that's okay.
Yes, it seems that the link that I clicked on does not provide me with video. But having said that, I can still give an update regarding the Children's First Initiative. When we last met, there was, to piggyback what Maria updated the public and the committee members today, is that there's been a pause taken on the Children's First Amendment, Children's First Initiative. And there's been, the pause is basically to move forward to do a stakeholder engagement process. And this engagement process, although the charter amendment itself has been pulled off the June ballot, the timeline that we are devising the proposed plan for engagement takes into consideration the possibility of a November ballot in mind. And so what this means is that we went to our general membership during our last meeting in January, and they voted 87% to support to move forward to gain input in order for us to have a breadth of voices, which these voices, oh, hold on a second. Hold on, wait. My bad, people. It's seeing right now. Can you folks hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Goodness, I sound like my mom. Okay, so basically, our membership voted overwhelmingly. 87% said yes to move forward with the engagement process to hear the voices, the many voices within that may be impacted by the youth service industry. And as a result, we have met with various consultants as well as DCYF leadership on the matter. And we are also devising a list of potential stakeholders that includes Juvenile Justice, JJPA, Providers Association, the Family Resource Center, as well as members of the ECE community, and as well as a list of reports such as the one that was presented today, the recovery plan, and other reports that basically have garnered interest and significant existing community input. And this is a huge task and undertaken by us. And it's really a tight timeline, but we are really hopeful about the potential outcomes and the analysis from that effort. So I guess this is where I asked, are there any questions from the committee on this report?
Before we proceed with committee questions, I'm going to ask that we go ahead and take public comment, and then we'll circle back around. So let's see. So thank you both for the update, and definitely hoping to hear more positive news in terms of wage equity. So let's go ahead and take public comment. So if there's any public comment on this agenda, you can go ahead and select raise hand on your screen, or from your phone, press *9. Anthony, are there any speakers in the queue?
I have one.
All right. So speaker, you can introduce yourself, and your 2 minutes begins now.
Hi there, everyone. It's good to see and hear you again. It's been a while since I've been to one of these meetings. My name is Molly Brown. I was formerly quite active in Service Providers Working Group and am now quite active in the Juvenile Justice Providers Association. And I guess my question, although I know you don't really answer questions, but maybe it's a comment. is I'm hoping that the conversations that are coming out of the questions raised about whether or not there should be a charter children's amendment is whether or not there should be one, quite frankly. I'm absolutely not convinced we need one. And I certainly don't want to think that we're all operating under the assumption that there would be potentially something on the ballot in November when it doesn't seem like we know whether or not that's necessary. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comment, Molly. Anthony, is there another speaker?
There are no other speakers.
All right, thank you. Hearing no further callers, public comment is now closed, and we can proceed with committee discussion. So members, if you have any questions, comments, please raise your hands. All right, so seeing none, thank you again, Madison and Frederic. We can move on to the item on the next item on the agenda, which is number 13, action items and member feedback. Thus far, we have said that we will table elections of the vice chair and the chair until our main meeting. And I believe that's all. Committee members, is there any comments or discussion? You can raise your hand. All right, let's go ahead and take public comment. Is there any public comment on this specific agenda item? From your screen, you can select raise hand, or from your phone, you can press *9. Anthony, are there any speakers in the queue?
There are no speakers in the queue.
All right, so public comment is now closed. We are now upon our last agenda item, which is adjournment. So before we fully adjourn, we're gonna ask for one last public comment. So is there any public comment on this specific agenda item? Anthony, are there any speakers in the queue?
There are no speakers in the queue.
All right, so public comment is now closed. OAC members, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Unfortunately, because we don't have quorum.
Right. Completely forgot. Okay, so I'm going to say that we close this informational meeting. Wishing you all a happy Valentine's Day. And yeah, we are done here. All right.